sweatpants, white noise, blue jeans, writing letters to old friends, black cats and tender moments, cherries in the spring, long walks, long nights, green tea, ice cream. It's so good, so good, so good to me.
What's up, everyone? It's Books and Looks TV. Today I'm going to be talking about Halle Bailey and how she fits into Disney's post-racial production cleanup scheme, whatever you want to call it. And I'm also going to be talking about how her relevance to the beauty standard gives her a lot of opportunities and proximity to whiteness. And also about how they kind of try to divide sisters and just a general aspect of like replacing a dark-skinned black woman again into like a classic black film. And I like to say that overall this video is for educational purposes only. I have nothing against Halle Bailey. I know this is a sensitive topic and I'm only here to explain the framework of the society that we live in and who benefits from that society and why. There's an article called Disney's Post-Racial Gaze, Film Pedagogy and the Construction of Racial Identities by Jessica Baker Key and Alfonso Walter Grant. And in this article, it talks about the historical context of Disney in film and how they depicted the race of various cultural identities, not just black people. I say that to say that a lot of times when we think about race, it's often like the total opposites of the spectrum, black and white. Of course, there are cultures outside of that who have been also depicted wrongfully or incorrectly by Disney. And so it says, although race is implicated throughout the history of Disney filmmaking, this may not be immediately recognizable to casual viewers. As Blodsworth, Lugo, and Flory explain, for most moviegoers, racial matters function at the level of unexamined presumption rather than thoughtfully considered judgment. Early Disney films explicitly promoted a white supremacist ideology, representing non-white characters as comical, inferior, or dangerous when they were not erased altogether. The 1990s saw a new wave of multicultural films, Pocahontas, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and Mulan, ushered in by a more liberal Clinton-era social and political climate. While these films included less offensive and more humanizing depictions of non-white characters, they tended to avoid addressing racial politics directly and instead presented romanticized composites based on images, stereotypes, and fantasies of the other. Disney films in the 21st century also echoed contemporary racial discourse by addressing racial hybridity more directly, while also reinforcing quote-unquote colorblind ideologies and middle-class American values of individualism and cultural exceptionalism. As a treatment of diversity in Disney films has evolved to address the social politics of each era, a body of critical academic scholarship has arisen concurrently, much of it based in postmodern identity politics and neo-Marxist social analysis. These critiques implicate Disney films in reinforcing white institutional power by framing non-white racial identities as other through racial binarism and primitivism, reinforcing negative racial stereotypes through anthropomorphic representation, and at times erasing non-white perspectives entirely. Again, that has been my criticism on Disney in the past. Like, I made a video on how like women are depicted, especially women of color, and I do think that that is often a criticism of Disney. While a lot of people praise The Little Mermaid for being representative of black women, I guess, as Halle played Ariel, someone with like red long locks, and of course she had relatively darker skin, a lot of people still felt like, why doesn't Disney just create a narrative for mermaids altogether? And then that also makes me want to think too, why can't we just support black indie filmmakers or black filmmakers to do this? Because there are a lot of creatives who want to see or who have told stories about black mermaids. But nonetheless, a lot of people ate up The Little Mermaid because again, it just gave them some nostalgia. There was a black face to it. And that again is no disrespect to Halle. I do think that she has a beautiful voice. I think that she is a beautiful person. But I do think we should examine the systems in which we live in and how a lot of times they're just band-aids to issues, especially when we think about racism in media. So many of you may know Halle Bailey as an American singer, songwriter, and actress. She was actually born on March 27, 2000 in Atlanta, Georgia. She is known for being one half of the musical sister duo Chloe and Halle Bailey. Together, the sisters managed to release albums such as The Kids Are All Right in 2018, and Ungodly Hour in 2020. And together they've earned 5 Grammy Award nominations. As an actress, Bailey has played a supporting role in the television sitcom Grownish from 2018 to 2022. And in 2023, she had her first lead role as Ariel in Disney's musical fantasy film The Little Mermaid. So now I'm going to again talk about what happened with The Little Mermaid, and then I'm going to go into The Color Purple. So again, Halle is obviously beautiful and talented, but I would like to explain what makes her beautiful in regards to playing both The Little Mermaid, a Disney film, and replacing the character Nettie, who was initially played by the Ghanaian UK-based actress Akosua Busia in The Color Purple. So again, The Little Mermaid and The Color Purple are like the opposites of what you would think of when it comes to media. Little Mermaid is a Disney children's film, and The Color Purple is like this black misogynoir, black feminist film, whatever you want to call it. It depicts totally different scenes. Some people might say, oh, that's great. She gets to explore herself or show different sides of what it means to be an actress. I think that's true too. Again, I think when it comes to The Little Mermaid, a lot of people again got excited that it was a black mermaid. With The Color Purple, I would say that it's a little problematic to me because again, she replaced a dark-skinned character, then just the role that Nettie originally played was seen as already beautiful. So I don't understand why they couldn't just replace her, the dark-skinned character, as the movie shows. And so like when you think about modern times, I see Fantasia, and I see Fantasia playing the role of Silly, who was known as an ugly character. Fantasia also having Afrocentric features. I think that's pretty questionable because again, when you look at Fantasia, see someone who has full lips, broad nose, etc., and to me she isn't ugly. Does she meet the beauty standard of like white society or Eurocentric beauty standards? She doesn't. When you look at someone like Halle Bailey, who got to navigate into the realm of The Little Mermaid, as someone who's petite, is like a slim nose, not pretty much full lips, and lighter skin, it just makes you really wonder like what are they trying to say about beauty to me. So again, in The Little Mermaid, she was critiqued in white spaces not having red hair, red enough hair. But to me, in black spaces, Halle Bailey would fit what it means to be quote unquote beautiful. When we even think about how Halle is expressed or depicted and compared to her sister, I think Halle's features like even her femininity, like her soft voice or her not being deemed as a wild woman, allows her to get spaces and be in roles or just be deemed as acceptable by the general black community. Because let's be real, there's a lot of posts that says things like, oh, I want Halle to remain classy, I want her being slutty like her sister. Or again, you just think of the narrative around that in general. Makes her sister more slutty. Her sister hasn't been doing anything other than being an entertainer, which she is. All she does is dance. Yes, she does some like she has done in the past, some suggestive photos. When you see Chloe Bailey in interviews, she never talks about her sex life, very reserved, etc. Again, just this ideal of me compared to her sister. Chloe has a more shapely body, and she is out to talk about sex and to even display it in film. And so a lot of people don't know how to separate the entertainer from the actual person. And so you see how like people would use that as a divisive tool to even talk about black women and how we should be when we aren't necessarily a monolith. And to say that as black women can be both things, see how there's like a double standard on what femininity is. So I think I'll define featureism now for those who may or may not know. Featureism is prejudice against Afrocentric features and the preference of Eurocentric features. It's preferring black people who have light colored skin, eyes, small or pointy nose, loose curled hair over those that have brown eyes, dark skin, broad or flat nose, and coarse, lightly curled hair. That's not to say that everyone has to have all of those features to be considered like a preference. Having some of those features usually deems you beautiful or closer to like the white beauty standard. In my opinion, Halle features have played a huge role in her success in Hollywood. She has, again, a body type that is small and petite, and her lips, slender nose, again, soft voice, and her whole demeanor is non-confrontational. Aside from Halle being obviously black, again, so I think when we speak of featureism, we often forget things like femininity, or how if you meet the looks of what it means to be beautiful in a Western society, you're often deemed as feminine by default. In the case of Halle and Chloe, though they look very similar, their body structure is very different. Chloe happens to be a curvier figure, and she has, to me, more Afrocentric features, particularly like her lips. And just also how she is deemed as a wild woman often has people comparing them. But in the grand scheme of things, Halle has always protected her sister as she should. And I think that the basis of sisterhood, whether you are related or not, is to check people who often do put you in a box or make you divisive amongst another. And there has been tweets of Halle saying things like, everyone who knows me knows I go to war for the ones I love, and I kept it real cute on this app for a while now. So just reminding y'all to please keep it cute too. So I think in an instance, which is ironic, that Chloe and Halle, they both did start off together. And at the time where they just sang like Disney or like popular music, you know, they both were not really sexualized. Again, you could always see that there was a difference in their look, etc. There's this article called African American Body Image, Identity, and Physical Self-Acceptance. When we think about featureism, in particular to the body shape or just being a black woman, it says that the physical characters examined include skin color, hair texture, and facial attributes such as lips and nose. As someone says, I believe African Americans with lighter skin are more attractive than those with darker skin. I prefer African Americans with a more slender nose compared to those with a broad or full nose. I feel that African Americans with thin lips are more attractive than those with full lips. And so this was a study where not only did they have a hypothesis what beauty meant in the African American community, the researcher also used a sample study to understand racial socialization. And so again, I think these type of things uphold beauty standards. It can cause people to question who they are or become insecure. And I say that because Chloe also went on the Tamron Hall show, and she made comments about how people's perspective of her expressing her sexuality bothered her, and how she was just deemed as like someone who was faking it or wasn't true to herself. There's this article called Black Women, Sisterhood, and the Difference Deviance Divide. Again, I think when it comes to Chloe Bailey, she wasn't seen as someone who was technically committing a crime, but how people objectify her body was seen as deviance. Again, I think that oftentimes as women try to say, oh, we live in a free society, you can do whatever you want, I think there is like some type of standards we place on someone else besides ourselves. And so in this article it says, Black women have reason to challenge the appraisals of Black female deviance, whether they are based on the standards of dominant society, those prevailing in the Black community. In the name of a Black sisterhood, community within the community, we might respond to female deviance with understanding, support, or praise based on the distinctive social, material, and political interests of Black women. In doing so, however, we risk being labeled deviant ourselves. This and other reasons tend to differentiate ourselves from those whose conduct falls within traditional definitions of deviance when we advance our claims for greater esteem and resources. Implications of this approach for the existence and maintenance of a true dynamic Black sisterhood. And then it goes into talking about Ruby Clark versus ABC. Ruby Clark was a Black woman who sued the American broadcasting company ABC defamation after her photograph appeared on the screen in a 1977 BBC News Close-Up program on commercialized sex. Particular segment that gave rise to her complaints focused on the impact of street prostitution on a Detroit neighborhood. I'll probably talk about that some other time. Again, how our image is portrayed is often criticized on how we should be deemed. And again, in the case of Chloe, she is someone who hasn't really had public relationships. Again, as an entertainer, I think she has tried to balance on what it means to be sexy and appealing, also manage the amount of talent she has. She is a great performer, but she also is a great vocalist. I think it is quite disheartening to judge Chloe as someone who shouldn't be respected, similarly to her sister, and just the general pressure it placed on her, especially for so long when their voices and talents have complemented each other. There is a book called Righteous Discontent, the Women's Movement in the Black Baptist Church from 1880 to 1920. It talks about respectability politics, how belief that behaving or appearing like the dominant group in society will deem you as more respectable and therefore more valued. When it comes to our ancestors, proximity to whiteness was a means of survival. Time went on, it began to gain true freedom and privileges, and this is cited by Therapy for Black Girls. I think, again, the term proximity to whiteness refers to the degree to which a person or group is perceived as being close to or similar to white people. This particular instances, I would say white women, because these are Black women I'm talking about. Again, this can be based on factors such as skin color, hair texture, facial features, accent, or cultural background. There is article called Proximity to Whiteness, Anti-Blackness, People of Color, and the Struggle for Solidarity. And Namisha Barden argues that proximity to whiteness can be a source of both privilege and oppression for people of color. She writes, people of color who are perceived as being close to whiteness may experience more opportunities and resources. They may also be seen as less authentic or less deserving of respect. And there's also one named Arthur Chan, as proximity to whiteness does not automatically translate to acceptance. In most circumstances, it simply means you are tolerated. Proximity to whiteness also does not and will not shield you from racism and systematic oppression. Proximity to whiteness, regardless of whether it's consciously or unconsciously internalized, does not serve you and is not worth holding on to. I relate all of this back into the greater Disney discussion and how white supremacy can create divisiveness among Black people and how we view ourselves. I think again that Halle Bailey does have some privilege in her features and how she carries herself. And I think we do need to check our language on how we project onto other Black women. End of the day, as you saw, Halle Bailey did receive a lot of backlash and racism. She was a Black Little Mermaid. And even though she is allowed to navigate into that space, still tolerated for her features, but she is not exempt from racism. And I think there's just something for us to remember. No matter how we try to become closer to whiteness, we aren't white. I think it's just important for us to celebrate sisterhood and respect ourselves for who we are, whether we meet the beauty standard or not. That's all I have to say about this topic. Thank you for listening to Books and Looks TV. Let me know what you think down below.